let's start with the Nova news, man. Let's start with the Nova news. The thing that's kind of interesting about the Nova news is I guess we should also talk about what's going on with Jeff Snider and the Hollywood trades, okay? Because this story directly deals with that. So yesterday, Jeff Snider said, exclusive, Ed Bornero to showrun Nova for Marvel. Now, almost immediately after this happened, and I don't even know the exact timeline here, but I would assume Jeff scooped this first at 3:21 p.m., and then I believe it was Deadline. They put out an article and did not give Jeff credit. They acted like their scoop about this happening was an exclusive. So, just to sort of recant what has been going on with Jeff Snider. Jeff Snider, incredibly good sources, okay? Jeff Snider, the only person that knew about Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom. He had this about a week before it was announced at Comic-Con. He had sources tell him it wasn't exactly true, so he had to kind of report it as a rumor. And then it ends up getting confirmed the week later, and Jeff was pissed. Jeff was pissed. And if any of you guys have been watching the crash out from Jeff Snider and, you know, his sort of beef with the trade articles, it would appear what's going on is Jeff is getting incredibly accurate information, and yet the sort of establishment apparatus of the Hollywood trades and the studios themselves, they continuously try to steal Jeff's scoop so that he doesn't even get credit for exclusives. They're sort of pushing him to the side, and this is pushing Jeff even further into breaking news, breaking leaks, rumors, and scoops and stuff like that. So, this was, I guess, some people were reporting as an exclusive by Snider and Deadline. As far as I'm concerned, Jeff Snider had this first. The Hollywood trades are whack, and they're trying to kind of besmirch Jeff Snider's name. Now, more to the point of the story, who is this Ed Bornero guy? Well, this guy's been in television for a long time. He was the showrunner for Criminal Minds for a long, long time. And that's kind of interesting. A super established showrunner and producer for network television is coming over to handle the Nova show. Now, in order to explain why this is such a big deal, we kind of have to take a step back and talk about Phase 4 a little bit. Like, I know, right? Like, oh, Phase 4, holy shit. But we got to talk about it. So, at the beginning of Phase 4, Bob Iger and Disney created this thing called Disney Plus. Maybe you guys have heard of it. It's a streaming platform. And along with this streaming platform, there was sort of a mandate from Disney to its different little studios, right? Like Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel Studios. And the mandate was create some streaming content to populate this Disney Plus streaming service. And so they did. Marvel Studios took it upon themselves to develop a whole shit ton of content. This is actually part of the Phase 4 problem. There was an amazing amount of content made. Frankly, way too much content was made. Okay? But it's not just the volume that was an issue for Marvel Studios. Marvel Studios had not really made television before this. They were a movie studio. Okay? And so when they came in to make these television shows, they had kind of an interesting strategy, which was bad. And the strategy was, we're not actually going to have showrunners. We're going to instead have lead writers. The lead writers would kind of act as showrunners, but then they would also get fired, and then changes would be made to the shows, which was essentially dictated by executive producers or producers. Okay? So, like, that shit didn't work. And we've seen that explored in the press. A lot of commentary around this. This idea did not work. And last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, Brad Winderbaum, Kevin Feige, they have come forward to say that not only do they now have somebody that runs the entire television department, which I believe is Winderbaum, but they're getting showrunners. They have showrunners now, okay? And what this news from Jeff Snider indicates is that they're not just going after showrunners, they're going after incredibly established industry veterans to go make some show content for them, which is so gratifying to me because it feels like this is a new direction. Man, I am not all that excited about Wonder Man. man, I'm not all that excited about Ironheart, mostly because these were shows that were shot without showrunners. They didn't make this change until after those shows went into production and were shot. Okay, so just from there, I'm excited. This guy's a vet. Nova's really cool. Okay, now, a couple other things that were going on. We had this, and this is kind of interesting. So, Richard Rider will be the main character in Disney Plus's Nova series. Okay, now, further context, we're looking at a post here from Alex Perez. He's giving context to what the Deadline article dropped, which again was trying to like besmirch Jeff and everything, right? Alex is saying it's going to be Richard Rider and his Nova Corps. Now, check this out. The Apocalyptic Horseman. This guy, who's like a newer scooper on the scene, but has a almost flawless record. This guy said like a month ago, this was November 23rd when he said this, I heard it revolves around a young Richard Rider and a team of Novas, with Richard being in his 20s. I'm unsure if Sam will be in it. That is pretty crazy. Okay, so we're getting some more details here. So yesterday on stream, was talking to Rob about this bit. He thought maybe it would be Sam Alexander. That is not the case. It is going to be Richard Rider, the old Dick Rider, man, which Richard Rider's an awesome character. Not as popular and well-known as like a Peter Parker, but Richard Rider is very similar to Peter Parker. He's almost like a more mature version of Peter Parker. People love Richard Rider, okay? So, we have this show, an actual industry vet showrunner. You've got Richard Rider in his 20s with a bunch of Novas. But that's not all, because we also got details that this show's villain is very likely to be Annihilus. Now, yesterday, Rob, when I was having a conversation with, sort of took issue with this because Annihilus is like one of the craziest, most powerful characters in Marvel. He's like a universal threat. And so it feels bad, potentially, to have him as just the villain of the Disney Plus show. But I actually think, and there have been some people out there kind of hinting at this as well, I think Annihilus will actually be a much bigger villain than just the villain of the Nova show. And I think the Nova show could be an interesting way to introduce Annihilus and set him up for bigger and better things, whether that would be him being the villain of a potential movie or even potentially the villain of the entire saga, which would be kind of weird because it's like a mutant saga and everything like that. But I think Annihilus is dope. And there are some people hinting that this will be more than Annihilus just being the villain and the big bad of that show. So you put all of that together, man, and I'm legitimately getting excited for what this Nova show could be. Maybe they will eventually introduce Sam Alexander in either the end of the show or potentially a second season, because the other thing that's interesting here is Marvel has talked about having a lot of interest in doing multiple seasons of shows. I frankly think this is partially because of the way that the Nielsen charting and the analytics work these days with streaming shows. So shows that have other seasons, they get to include prior seasons in the numbers for whenever a new season of a show comes out. So like when Stranger Things comes out, it does very well, partially because people go back and they binge all the other seasons. So it's like, it's very prevalent. A ton of people watching it, gets big numbers, that gets big press. That's good. That's successful. So it does seem like Marvel wants to potentially do multiple seasons, which could be a cool way to kind of circle around the Annihilus thing. Could be a cool way to potentially introduce your Sam Alexander later on. And just in general, I love the idea of the Nova Corps and Nova Prime, potentially being, Richard Rider. I actually really like that. And I think that is pretty damn cool. So, potentially out of nowhere, something that was not really on my radar, I wasn't really excited about it. All of a sudden, Feels like they might be cooking with gas over there when it comes to Nova. I will open this up to the chat, guys. You guys got any questions, comments, concerns when it comes to Nova and the news around this show? What do you think? Bill True, thank you for 6 months over on Twitch with Prime. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Don't forget, there is Noel, King in Black, as a universal threat also. Yeah, that's true. I don't know how relevant that'll be to the Nova show. But yeah, that's true. Remember when the Nova Corps was wiped out? What do you mean? In the MCU or in the comics? I mean, technically, we don't see this, but Thanos gets that Power Stone and wipes that planet out. I don't know that all of the Nova Corps was eliminated. But yeah, I mean, obviously a good bit of them were. And I wonder if that scene will be, you know, something to do with the Nova show. I think that's big speculation out there, right? Like Thanos destroying Xandar. That's interesting. We've all wanted to see that. Is that potentially going to be connected to Dick Ryder? Richard Ryder? That's an interesting question. Good point. Need more info. Not too familiar with Nova, to be honest. Yeah, I totally understand that. I think a lot of more modern comic book fans or normies are not super into Nova. Like I said, I think Richard Rider's a really cool character. A little bit like a more mature version of Peter Parker. You know, just like has goodwill, has good heart, adventure seeking, a little bit of a rascal. I think you guys will really like Richard Rider. I see a deep dive on Nova in our future. Yeah, for sure. And I guess for me, the hope is that it's going to be highly produced and really, really good. Like, I think right now, when we think of this Nova show, we unfortunately have to think of like Hawkeye Season 1, Miss Marvel, Moon Knight, you know, like all these other Phase 4 shows, which frankly, I'm not that interested in, right? If we were just doing a run-of-the-mill, paint-by-numbers version of the Phase 4 Disney Plus shows, and it was Nova, I'm not interested. If it has wider scope, an actual showrunner, multiple seasons, really crazy big bad, really interesting cast, pretty big budget, now you're cooking. Now you have me interested. Another element of this, and oh my God, I can't believe I didn't bring this up earlier, but this is so cool. You know what else this is? Do you know what else this could be, guys? This could be Kevin Feige doing that white Suge Knight thing again. Because what is DC doing? The Lantern Show. The Lantern Show is supposed to be HBO level production. And the Green Lantern Corps and the Nova Corps, they're very similar. They are space cops. That's what they are. And we also know that the HBO level production Lantern Show is terrestrial. It's earthbound. It's not going to go crazy in space. And frankly, although I'm still interested, and I actually think that could be cool for the story they're cooking up there, that's potentially because of budgetary reasons. And I think a lot of Green Lantern fans might be a little upset because they're going to want the crazy space cop galactic cosmic adventure. Well, all of a sudden, Kevin Feige seems to be offering up a version of that for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? That is pretty cool. Is this guy up to his old ways? That's kind of an interesting angle. I was also thinking the fact that Gunn is doing the Lantern Show and bringing like really, really talented people in there. And again, giving it a production and pre-production and really trying to set this thing up to be like elevated genre. That seems what it is to me. It's like elevated genre, right? That potentially builds competition. That potentially forces Marvel's hand to take their shows more seriously, to try to elevate the genre that they are doing. And ultimately, I've always said, like, dude, DC needs to get, like, their shit together, partially because Marvel needs competition. Competition is great. I mean, look at what's currently happening with the MCU right now. And I think The Boys has legitimately changed how Kevin Feige is thinking about certain things. I think Deadpool and Wolverine being R has something to do with the success of The Boys. How? Because it's like The Boys is really big. It's really hard R, and it's really big. Even something like the Invincible show might have kind of convinced them that that could be a little bit more viable. Competition in the marketplace is very healthy. It allows us, as the audience and fans, to have our voice and preference be heard through volume and sheer numbers. What we decide to dig into, what we decide to enjoy and platform and, get excited about, that is a signal and a signal boost to these other studios. So overall, this Nova show, I really like what we're hearing. The context of this also being essentially Marvel's Green Lantern, that's kind of interesting. The context of Gunn doing high production, elevated television that's HBO level, that potentially pushing Marvel into that direction as well. Oh my God, I love it. I love it, guys. Very, very, very excited. Very excited for Nova and how that could end up, right?